So today we are going to do an introduction lesson on circles. We're going to talk about the different parts of a circle, and we're going to talk about the circumference, diameter, and radius of circles. We're going to start off by talking about the different parts of a circle. So I'm sure you've seen the shape of a circle in your everyday life. Maybe when you're eating an Oreo cookie, that's the shape of a circle. So let's talk about the center point first. So the center is right in the middle of the circle. So I'm highlighting it here in red. This is the center of the circle. The center is the point right in the middle of the circle. So that red point is called the center. The next term we're going to talk about is the radius. The radius connects the center of the circle to the edge of the circle. So the radius, it goes from the center of the circle to the edge of the circle. So I just drew a radius in purple. And again, this is called the radius. The chord is the segment that connects two parts of the circle together. So the chord, I'm going to draw here in orange. This is called a chord. So again, it's a segment that connects two parts of the circle together. If you notice, this chord isn't going through the center of the circle. A chord does not have to go through the center of the circle. It's just going from one point of the circle to the other point. And this is the chord. The other term we're going to talk about is the diameter. A diameter is a segment that goes through the center of the circle and has endpoints that lie on the edge of the circle. So our diameter, I'm going to draw this horizontal line here. It's going from one end of the circle to the other end, and it's going right through the center of the circle. This is called the diameter. The diameter and the chord are different because the diameter goes right through the center of the circle, whereas the chord does not have to go right through the center of the circle. Let's talk a little more about radius and diameter, and we'll touch on a new term called the circumference. So again, the radius of a circle is the distance from the center to the outside of the circle. So here's my center point. The radius goes from the center to the outside. The diameter goes straight across the circle right through the middle. So here's our middle point, our center. And the diameter is a straight line that goes right through the center. Now the next term we're going to talk about is circumference. The circumference is the distance around the circle. So I'm drawing it here in blue. The whole distance around the circle is called the circumference. And we need to use the radius and the diameter in order to find the circumference. Let's do an example of finding the radius and the diameter. So radius is half of the diameter. So say you're given a circle and the circle provides you with the diameter and it asks you to find the radius, you would do diameter divided by 2. Diameter is 2 times the radius. So if you were given a circle that provided you with the radius and it asked you to find the diameter, you would have to do 2 times the radius. Let's look at some examples. So in example A, we're given this segment here that goes from the center to the edge. And it's 5 millimeters here. So is this the radius or the diameter? So if it's going from the center to the edge, this is the radius. So our radius is 5. Now we know the net radius. Let's find the diameter. So looking over, if we want to find the diameter, we need to do 2 times the radius. So we would be doing 5 times 2. The diameter is 10. Great. Let's look at our second example. So in the second example, we're given a segment that starts at one end of the circle, goes through the middle of the circle, and hits the other edge of the circle. And that is 12 centimeters. So we're given the diameter in the circle, because again, the diameter goes from one side of the circle to the other side and goes right through the middle. Our diameter is 12 centimeters. Now we need to find the radius. So given the diameter, to find the radius, you're going to do d divided by 2, diameter divided by 2. 12 divided by 2 is 6 centimeters. So this is how you find the radius and the diameter when you're given either or. Now let's talk about calculating the circumference. So again, the circumference is the distance around the circle. So you're going to use two formulas depending on what information is provided to you. So if you're given the diameter of a circle, you're going to use this formula here that I'm putting a yellow box around. So circumference equals pi times diameter. So this symbol might be a new symbol for some of you, but this symbol here means pi. And the number that we use to represent pi is 3.14. So again, if you're given the diameter and you need to find the circumference, you're going to use c equals pi times d. If you're given the radius and you're asked to find the circumference, you're going to use this formula that I'm putting a purple box around. C equals 2 times pi times r. So in both examples, the d in the first formula means diameter, the r in the second formula means radius, and that this symbol down below here, that means pi, and we're going to use 3.14. Now let's look at some examples. So example 1, find the circumference of the circle. So step 1, we need to decide which formula to use based on what is given in the diagram. So our diagram of our circle here on the left, what information are we given? We're given a 5, right? We're given this 5, and we're given this line, this segment here, from one side of the circle right through the middle to the other side. We need to decide which formula we're going to use. The two formulas are up here in the corner. Which one are we going to use based on the information given to us? So 5, is this the radius or the diameter? It's going from one side of the circle to the other right through the middle, so that means this is our diameter. So the diameter is given to us. So knowing that, which formula should we use based on the two? Since we're given the diameter, we're given the d, we're going to use this formula up top. Circumference equals pi times d. Again, circumference equals pi times d is the formula we are using. Step 2, you need to plug in the numbers that are given to you. So c is what we're trying to solve for. Pi, the symbol pi, I told you in the previous slide, we're going to use the number 3.14 to represent pi. And instead of d, we're going to plug in the number that represents d, which is 5. So now we have 3.14 times 5. In step 3, you just need to multiply to get the answer. So 3.14 times 5 is 15.7 inches. So the circumference of this circle is 15.7 inches. All right, let's look at another example. So here's the second example of finding the circumference of a circle. So we're going to follow the same sequence of steps. So step 1, we need to decide which formula to use based on what is given in the diagram. So in the diagram, we're given the number 5 again. However, 5 is now just going from the center of the circle to the edge of the circle. Now, is this the radius or the diameter? If it's going from the center to the edge, that is the radius. So we're given the radius. Now we need to decide which formula to use. So we're given the radius, we're given r, so we're going to use the second formula. C equals 2 times pi times r. So the formula again, we're using C equals 2 times pi times r. Step 2, we need to plug in the numbers that were given. So the 2, you're always going to have a 2 in this formula. It's just part of the formula. So 2 times pi. So again, you can write pi, you can write 3.14. Here I just wrote pi times r is 5. Now we need to multiply to get our answers. So if you had a calculator, you could just plug this into your calculator to get your solution, but I'm going to show you the steps. So for the first step, you'd want to multiply the two numbers together that you see here, the 2 and the 5. So 2 times 5 is 10, and then we still have the pi though. We can't just eliminate the pi. So now we have 10 times pi. And again, I got the 10 by multiplying 2 times 5. Now, like we mentioned earlier, pi is 3.14. So now we're going to do 10 times 3.14. And when we plug that into our calculators, we get 10 times 3.14 is going to be 31.4. So that means that the circumference of this circle is 31.4 centimeters. The next thing I want to talk about is how to find the radius or the diameter of a circle when you're given the circumference. So in the previous two examples, we were given the radius or we were given the diameter and we needed to find the circumference. Now we're given the circumference and we need to work backwards to find the radius or the diameter. Let's look at the example on the left. We'll call this number 1. So in number 1, we have a circle here and we have this question mark. What is this? This is what we're trying to solve for. So we need to identify what this line here, what is this? What part of the circle is this? Is this the diameter or is this the radius? So if it's starting from the center and it's going to the edge of the circle, this is the radius. So r, we're trying to solve for the radius. It's unknown. We're given the circumference. So the circumference is equal to 18.84. So we're going to use that number to help us find the radius of this circle. So since we're trying to solve for r, we're going to use the formula c equals pi times r. Right? Because we're trying to solve for r. Now that you know which formula to use, you need to just plug in the information that you have. So our c, we know, is 18.84. I'm going to plug that in right there. 2 is part of the formula, so we don't have to change that, times pi. I put 3.14 because that's the number we use to represent pi. And then radius, that's what we're trying to solve for. We don't know that, so I'm going to keep that letter r there. That's unknown. We're trying to solve for r, so we're trying to get r by itself. And in order to do that, this is like an algebraic problem where we need to do inverse operations to solve for r. So the first step you want to do is multiply 3.14 times 2. 3.14 times 2 is going to be 16.28. So now we have 16.28 times r. We want to get r by itself, so we have to do the opposite of multiplying by 6.28, which is dividing by 6.28. On the right side here, when you do 6.28 divided by 6.28, that cancels out. And remember, whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other side. So 18.84 divided by 628 is going to get us our answer. Because if you notice, now r is by itself. That's what we wanted. So we'll put r down below. And when you do 18.84 divided by 6.28, you get 3. So the radius of this circle is 3 centimeters. Let's look at example 2. Pretty similar, but now we're going to be solving for not the radius, we'll be solving for the diameter. So how do I know that we're solving for the diameter in this second problem? If you notice here, we're given a line that goes from one side of the circle to the other side, and it goes right through the middle, but we don't know it, right? Question mark. This is what we're trying to solve for. And we know that the term for the segment that goes across the circle from one side to the other, and it goes right through the center, this is the diameter. So we're trying to solve for D. So we know the circumference in this example is 21.98. The circumference is given to us. So since we're trying to solve for the diameter, we're going to use the formula C equals pi times diameter, right? We're using the formula that has a D in it because we're trying to solve for D. Now let's plug in the information we know. So we know C, our circumference, is 21.98. We know that pi, we use the number 3.14 to represent pi, and D is unknown. This is what we're solving for, so we're just going to put our D there. Now, this is just a one-step equation here because we have 3.14 times D. In order to get D by itself, in order to isolate D and solve for D, we need to do the opposite of multiplying by 3.14, which is dividing by 3.14. 3.14 divided by 3.14 cancels out. And whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other side, so it balances. 21.98 divided by 3.14 is 7. So the diameter of this circle is 7. Okay. Basically, anytime you're given the circumference of a circle and you're asked to find the diameter, like in problem number 2, you're just going to do the circumference that's given to you divided by pi. Okay. Now let's look at another example of each here. We'll separate, these are two different. So in the first, on the left-hand side, it wants us to find the radius. So find the radius. So again, radius is r. So we're given the circumference is 50 inches. So since we're trying to solve for r, trying to solve for the radius, we're going to use the formula that has the r in it. We're going to use the formula C equals 2 times pi times r. Now let's fill in the information we know into that formula. So we know the circumference is 50. So where the C is in the formula, we're going to put our 50. 2 times pi is part of the formula. And then we don't know r. We're trying to solve for r. So we're going to keep that variable r there. So now we have 50, the circumference, equals 2 times pi times r. Now let's solve. So the first step is you want to multiply 2 times pi, so 2 times 3.14, and you're going to get 6.28, and we're going to keep the r next to it times r because we're trying to solve for r. So again, I got 6.28 by multiplying 2 times pi. Now, this is a one-step equation. We want to get r by itself. So we have 6.28 times r. The opposite of multiplying by 6.28 is dividing by 6.28. Now this cancels out, and whatever you do to one side, you have to do the other. So now we have 50 divided by 6.28. Okay, so by dividing, we now are able to isolate the r. So we have r by itself here. So 50 divided by 6.28 is 7.9. So when you put it in your calculator, if I were to do it right here, 50 divided by 6.28 divided by, 50 divided by 6.28, in my calculator, I get 7.96. So since the number after the 9 is a 6 and it's greater than 5, I can round the 9 up, which means it would round up to 7. So our answer for the radius is approximately 8.0. Now for the diameter, if We're trying to solve for the diameter, so we're trying to solve for d. So we're going to use this formula, c equals pi times d. Now let's plug in the information we know into the formula. So we know that the circumference is 50. So I'm going to put 50 where the c goes. So we have 50 equals pi times d. Now pi, again, we use the number 3.14 to represent pi. So we have 3.14 times d. Now in order to get d by itself, in order to isolate d, you have to do the opposite of multiplying by 3.14, which is dividing by 3.14. So we're going to do 50 divided by 3.14, which is 15.9. Okay. And when you plug this into your calculator, so in my calculator, if I do 50 divided by 3.14, I get 15.92. Since the number after the 9 is a 2 and 2 is not greater than 5, we cannot round up. So we're going to keep our answer at 15.9. So the diameter, given the circumference is 50, is 15.9.